Hello and good day to you. Today is July 11th, a Monday, and I am home from work today. I may have done a little bit too much partying from that RV-15 announcement this past weekend. As you can see here, I have a tire issue. One of the issues with the RV-12 IS, and I think the original legacy RV-12, is that the wheel camber is a little bit too much here. Let me throw up a quick graphic so you can see what I'm talking about. And as you can see here from this, well, you can just take one quick look at this and you can tell that the outer edges are going to wear down faster than the inside or the center part of the tire. So today's goal is to replace these tires. Really what I think I'm going to do is just reverse it so we wear out the inboard side of the tire. And this isn't the worst camber I've seen. Have seen worse. Okay, that was an extreme example, but that's pretty much what's happening here. Except in this case, the outboard side of the tire, not the inboard side. So we're going to make quick work of this rear fairing here, and just 4 screws hold this bad boy on, and we'll get right to work. Now, you can use a ratchet for this, but the real way to do this is with a screw gun. Now it's time to remove this nut that holds on the wheel. So as you can see here, I'm removing the cotter pin. This is a one-time use only pin. Do not try and reuse this. If you've ever seen those YouTube videos where wheels fall off aircraft, this is why. So just order yourself a new bag of them. There's a part number in the upper right corner, and you can order them directly from Matco. You'll also want an 1.5 inch socket. I've ordered this one from Amazon. This one was $15 or $16. It's well worth the money. It'll make quick work of taking this nut off of the wheel. And of course, hindsight is always 20/20. You can see I'm removing the 2 nuts or 2 bolts here on the back that hold on the caliper. You want to leave that wheel nut on because your wheel will fall off once you remove these 2 screws on the back here. And here you can see I'm going to give these wheel bearings a quick wipe down with this rag. We want to remove any obvious dirt and excess grease. We're going to pack these full of new grease, and I'll show you that in a minute. Now, to get this inboard brake pad off, we need to remove these 2 bolts here. One side is a hex, the other side's a nut. And there's a spacer in between, and here comes the pad along with the backing plate. And again, I'll show you how to mount new pads to these backing plates in a little bit. Now these spacers that I'm taking out, you want to again wipe those free of dirt, and we're going to put a little coating of grease on the inside and outside of those. As well, you want to wipe down the piston itself. There will be some dirt around the piston, and then we're going to take that backing plate and just with hand pressure, press that piston all the way back in. So this here is a Rapco RA825 brake rivet toolkit. I think I got this from Aircraft Spruce for maybe $30, $40. Over time, this will save you some money. Now, once the die makes contact with that brass rivet, it really just takes one full rotation of that handle to break through, and you will hear a pop. And now you can back it out. If you don't have this particular tool, you can use a number 25 drill bit to drill through these rivets. You might also want to have a pair of pliers, because sometimes that die does get stuck in that backing plate. Now, I'm not going to show you all 6 rivets, but after you're done with them, make sure you wipe these backing plates down. You want it free of any debris so that when you mount the new brake pads to it, they'll sit flat. You also might want to check any warping of this backing plate. You're allowed to have I believe it's 0.010 of warp on that backing plate. Also, take note that there are 2 different size rivets because both of the backing plates are a different thickness. Here you can see I changed out the dies. Now this is what we need to set the new rivets in these brake pads. Now I recommend that you put all 3 rivets through the holes because there is a lot of play with these rivets, and it is possible that if you do one rivet, you won't be able to get the other 2 rivets actually pushed through the pad and through the backing plate. So I'm not going to show you all 6 rivets here, but it's the same procedure for all of them. And you basically are cranking down on that handle until that tool bottoms out. 0.178 is the new pad thickness. The service limit is 0.100. Well, now we're going to pack the bearings with new grease. We've cleaned up these bearings. Now keep in mind that these do have the integrated grease seal, that's a black thing on the tapered bearings. And what you're also seeing here too is the Lyle 34550 handy packer bearing packer tool. So because of that grease seal, we're going to need to press down on this plunger here a little bit more than simple hand pressure. So I'm going to just step on it carefully. And instead of the grease being forced up out the top of the bearings, which it can't because of the seal, it's going to be forced out the side of the bearings right through the rollers. And there's less of a gap in there. It makes a big mess. We're going to have to take a lot of this grease off of these bearings. The grease that you're really looking for is inside the bearing, so anything that's external you should really wipe off. That's way too much. But this tool is really good because it guarantees that whatever grease was inside the bearing has now been pushed out. So you know that you have all fresh grease inside. Now, I should also mention here that the grease that you see is mobile grease number 28, which is a synthetic aviation grease. If you check the van's assembly instructions, they call for the Aeroshell number 22. Either is fine. If you check the actual Matco manual, they specify what greases are acceptable for these bearings. Okay, now we're going to disassemble the wheel itself. The first step here is to remove the brake rotor. Now you will need this T27 IP. This is a Torx Plus bit. Now I recommend that you actually use a real Torx Plus bit. You can get away with using the standard Torx bit, but you really don't want to strip these screws. If you have to drill these out, it's a big problem. Now, unless you have thousands of hours on your aircraft, this rotor should be fine. I'm measuring 0.192. We're good down to 0.13. Now we're going to remove the old weights and also remove the air from the tire. Now we're going to split the 2 halves of the wheel. You're going to need a 1/4 inch T-handle Allen wrench on one side and a standard socket with maybe a small extension on the other side. There are 6 of these bolts to undo. I'm not going to show you all of them. This is pretty standard stuff here. Now here's a perfect time to inspect the tube itself. Look for any areas of chafing, any sort of abrasion between the tire itself and the tube. Now some tire talc is in order here. There should be some left over from before. I'm going to put a fresh coating of some talc in here. As you can see here, I'm making a giant mess. I did not have a visual on the left side of that tire, and now as I'm moving the talc around inside there, I realize that the tire is empty. I'm going to do this again, a little bit more careful this time. And now I'll put my hand in there and just swish it around, get that inner surface coated really well. I'll also do the same to the tube itself. Now, I did put too much talc in there, so I'm going to take the tire outside and do that to it. Now we're going to stuff the tube back into the tire And we're going to make sure that the stem is pointed out of the good side or the unworn side of the tire. As you can see here, I have put both wheel halves back together, and I am about to start torquing down on these nuts. Everything in this wheel is 100 inch-pounds. That's the magic number, 100. And everything looks good here, so we're going to inflate the tire to 25 psi. And now we're going to go ahead and reattach the rotor to the wheel assembly using that Torx Plus bit. Now, I think I picked up this wheel balancer at Harbor Freight a long time ago. I'm not even sure if they still sell it. You can only do really small wheels like this size. I'm not even sure if a motorcycle wheel would fit on this. So I'm slowing it down a little bit so we're not here until the 12th of never for it to find its heavy spot. And it looks like we found it, and I'm going to mark where I need to add the weights. Now, unfortunately, my camera does die after this, but I add about 3 ounces, and then I spin the wheel a couple times, and I find that we're good with 3 ounces here. Now, we're going to first put on the inboard brake pad. Now, don't forget that all of the nuts and bolts on the brake assemblies are 100 inch-pounds, so I will get the torque wrench out and do a little clicky-click action with that. Also, don't forget to put those spacers back in underneath these bolts here. Now, I know you guys have 2 eyes, but this is directly from the Matco installation manual regarding the axle nut. Tighten it until all play is out of the assembly. Rotate the wheel back and forth while tightening the nut to help seat the bearings. When all play is out and the wheel rotates freely, tighten to the next slot and insert the cotter pin. The rubber seal on the tapered roller bearing should remain stationary while the wheel rotates around it. If the seal is spinning on the axle, tighten the nut further until the seal stops spinning with the wheel. It appears as if I found my position here. I'm going to back off just a little bit until the cotter pin hole lines up with one of the castellations. Now, the trick I have here is to pre-bend that cotter pin about, maybe 3/4 of the way up and insert it. If you don't pre-bend it, you can't. There's not enough clearance to insert it straight in. Now, this is an awful shot I have going on here. You can't see anything. But essentially, I'm putting these 2 bolts through the caliper, through a spacer, and then to the outboard brake pad backing plate. Now, there are 2 Nordlock washers on each of these bolts. You can reuse Nordlock washers as long as they're not damaged. So inspect them before you put them back on. They should be okay. And again, we're looking for 100 inch-pounds on both of these bolts. And of course, if you have wheel fairings, there's a couple more steps involved. Here, you must put the blue Loctite on both of these AN3 bolts. Now, I specifically mentioned that these are AN3s because obviously these are not going to be 100 inch-pounds. They're more like 25 or 30 inch-pounds for an AN3 bolt. Click. Well, even if you aren't the original builder, I'm sure you've removed and reattached these fairings a million times, so there's no need to show you that. If you enjoyed this content and want to see more RV-12 maintenance videos, give that subscribe button a little tappy tap action there. Do not smash it. You will break your phone.